I never imagined that at 60 years old, I'd find myself sitting in my car outside my son's house with nowhere to go. But there I was, staring at the darkened windows of the farmhouse where my son James lives with his wife Vanessa, the tears on my cheeks illuminated only by the dim glow of my dashboard lights. Just 12 hours earlier, I'd had a husband of 35 years, a beautiful home in Riverside, and the certainty that my children would always be there for me. Now, I had a hastily packed suitcase in my trunk, and the devastating realization that everything I thought was solid in my life had crumbled in a single day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. The maple trees outside our bedroom window had just begun to turn brilliant shades of orange and red, a view I'd cherished through 30 autumns in our Riverside home. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen island, planning Thanksgiving dinner, always my favorite holiday to host. Rob, my husband, was unusually quiet, methodically spreading peanut butter on his toast while avoiding eye contact. "I think we should invite Vanessa's parents this year," I said, breaking the silence. James mentioned they might not have plans, and it would be nice to get to know them better. Rob nodded absently, still not looking up. "Whatever you want to do, Maggie." There was something in his tone, a flatness that made me pause. After 35 years of marriage, you develop an ear for the unspoken. "Is everything okay?" I asked, setting down my mug. He finally looked up, his blue eyes unreadable behind his glasses. "We need to talk, Maggie. But not now. Tonight. After dinner." A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the kitchen. Those words, "we need to talk," they're never harbingers of good news. But I nodded, forcing a smile. "Okay, tonight then." I spent the day in a fog of anxiety, cleaning the house that was already clean, rearranging flowers that didn't need rearranging. By afternoon, I couldn't stand the waiting anymore. I decided to visit James and Vanessa at their farmhouse on the edge of town, partly to discuss Thanksgiving plans, but mostly to distract myself from whatever conversation awaited me that evening. The drive to their place usually calmed me. Winding country roads, horses grazing in pastures, the mountains in the distance. But today, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my mind racing with possibilities of what Rob might want to discuss. Retirement plans? Health concerns? Or something worse? When I pulled into James and Vanessa's gravel driveway, I noticed unfamiliar cars parked outside. Company. I hesitated, wondering if I should have called first, but then decided to surprise them. I'd brought fresh apple cider and cinnamon donuts from the farmer's market, a perfect autumn treat. I knocked on their front door, balancing the cider and pastry box in one arm. From inside, I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses. James opened the door, his expression shifting from welcoming to surprised, and then strangely to something resembling discomfort. "Mom," he said, the word coming out like a question. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said brightly, holding up my offerings. "Thought I'd drop by with some treats. Is this a bad time?" Before he could answer, a woman appeared beside him. Not Vanessa, but someone older with Vanessa's eyes and smile. Her mother, Carol, whom I'd met only once at the wedding 2 years ago. "Margaret, isn't it?" Carol said, her tone pleasant but cool. "What a surprise." "Maggie, please," I corrected gently, offering a smile. "I didn't realize you were in town." "Oh, we've been here almost a week," she replied. "David and I are helping the kids prepare for the arrival." "The arrival?" I repeated, confusion clouding my thoughts. James cleared his throat, exchanging a look with his mother-in-law. "Vanessa's pregnant, Mom. We were going to tell you and Dad this weekend." The news should have brought joy, but instead, I felt a hollowness in my chest. A week. They'd known, for at least a week, had Vanessa's parents helping them prepare, and hadn't thought to tell me, the grandmother-to-be. That's wonderful news, I managed, trying to hide my hurt. Why didn't you call? I would've— It's been hectic, James interrupted, not quite meeting my eyes. Vanessa's been feeling sick, and we've been setting up the nursery. I could have helped with that, I said softly. An awkward silence fell between us, broken only when Vanessa appeared in the hallway behind them, her hand resting lightly on her still flat stomach. Maggie, she said, her voice strained with forced cheerfulness. What a surprise. Looking past them, I could see the dining room table set with Vanessa's good china, the set I'd helped her pick out after the wedding. Wine glasses filled, candles lit, what looked like a celebration in full swing. I'm sorry, I said, understanding, awning. You're having a dinner party. I should have called first. It's just a small gathering, Vanessa explained. My parents, my sister, and her husband. The implication hung in the air. A family celebration. Their family, not including me. I should go, I said, forcing a smile as I handed the box and cider to James. Enjoy these, and congratulations on the baby. That's such wonderful news. As I turned to leave, Carol's voice stopped me. Why don't you join us, Margaret? There's plenty of food. It was a courtesy offer, nothing more. Her tone made that clear, and James's expression, a mixture of obligation and discomfort, confirmed it. No, I couldn't intrude, I said, quickly. Rob's waiting for me at home. We've got dinner plans. I just wanted to drop these off. It was a lie, but it preserved my dignity. As I walked back to my car, I heard the door close behind me, heard the laughter resume as if I'd never interrupted. And that's when the first crack appeared in my world, a small fissure that would soon become a chasm. On the drive home, my vision blurred with unshed tears. It wasn't just being excluded from the dinner or even learning about my first grandchild's impending arrival as an afterthought. It was the realization that in my son's new life, I was becoming peripheral, an outsider. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across our front lawn. Rob's car was already there, which was unusual. He typically worked late on Tuesdays. Inside, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in front of him, another oddity. Rob rarely drank hard liquor, especially on weeknights. You're home early, I said, setting my purse down on the counter. I came home to talk, he replied, his voice steady but strained. Where were you? I went to see James and Vanessa, I said, sinking into the chair across from him. Did you know she's pregnant? And her parents have been in town for a week, helping them set up the nursery? Rob didn't react to the news or my obvious hurt. Instead, he took a slow sip of his whiskey, set the glass down carefully, and looked me directly in the eyes. Maggie, he said, I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, impossible to unhear. I stared at him, certain I'd misunderstood. What? I've been thinking about this for a long time, he continued, each word precise and rehearsed. I'm not happy, Maggie. I haven't been for years, and I don't think you are either. That's not true, I protested, my voice rising. We've been fine. We've been good. 35 years, Rob. 35 years of building a life together. He shook his head slowly. We've been coexisting, not living. Not really. I want more than this, Maggie. And I think deep down, so do you. Because I spend too much time. With the children? Because I volunteer too much? I can cut back. We can travel more. Do those river cruises you've talked about. It's not about what you do or don't do, he interrupted, his voice maddeningly calm. It's about what I feel. Or rather, what I don't feel anymore. As he spoke, I noticed details I'd been too distracted to see when I first came in. The suitcase by the door, his jacket draped over it, car keys placed deliberately on the side table. "You're leaving," I said, the realization dawning. "Tonight." He nodded. "I've found an apartment downtown. I'll come back for the rest of my things later this week." "An apartment," I repeated numbly. "How long have you been planning this?" He hesitated, then admitted, "I signed the lease 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. While I'd been planning our Thanksgiving menu, ordering new decorations for the living room, thinking about our future together, he'd been planning his exit. "Is there someone else?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "No," he said, and I wanted to believe him. "This isn't about another woman, Maggie. It's about me needing to find out who I am outside of this marriage before it's too late." The midlife crisis cliché would have been laughable if it weren't destroying my life in real time. "You're 62, Rob. You know exactly who you are." "That's just it," he said, shaking his head. "I don't think I do. I've been Rob Wilson, accountant, husband, father, for so long that I've lost track of who Rob Wilson actually is, what he wants, what makes him happy." "And you think abandoning your family will help you figure that out?" My voice was rising, now anger beginning to cut through the shock. "I'm not abandoning anyone," he said firmly. "James and Emily are adults with their own lives." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "And I'm not abandoning you either. I'm just changing our arrangement." "Our arrangement?" I echoed in disbelief. "That's what you call 35 years of marriage? An arrangement?" He sighed, finishing his whiskey in one gulp. "I knew. You wouldn't understand." "You're right, I don't understand," I said, tears finally spilling over. "I don't understand how you can throw away 3 decades of life together without even trying to fix whatever you think is broken." "There's nothing to fix, Maggie. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's not broken. It's just over. At least for me." With those words, he stood up, grabbed his jacket and suitcase, and walked out the door. Just like that. 35 years ended in a 10-minute conversation. I sat at the kitchen table long after his car had disappeared down the street, trying to make sense of what had just happened. 2 bombshells in one day, my son starting a family without including me, and my husband walking out without warning. My world was collapsing, and I had no idea how to stop it. In the quiet of our suddenly too large house, I picked up my phone. I needed to talk to someone. I needed my children. With shaking fingers, I called James. When he answered, I could hear the dinner party still going on in the background. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. "Mom?" He sounded concerned. "Is everything okay?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Your father just left me. He wants a divorce." The background noise on James's end diminished as he presumably moved to a quieter room. "What? Are you serious?" "He had a suitcase packed. He's already rented an apartment," I said, tears choking my voice. "I don't know what to do, James. I don't think I can be alone tonight. Can I come stay with you? Just for tonight?" There was a long pause. Too long. Then some muffled conversation I couldn't quite make out. "Mom," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm. "I don't think that's a good idea right now. We've got Vanessa's family here, and you know how small the guest room is with all the baby stuff." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "James, I'm not asking to move in. I just need somewhere to go tonight. I can sleep on the couch. I can't be in this house alone right now." Another pause. More muffled conversation. Then, "What about Emily? Have you called her?" "She's an hour away," I reminded him. "And she's got the kids and work tomorrow." "Mom, I'm really sorry about Dad. That's awful." But tonight is just not good timing. Maybe tomorrow? Vanessa's parents are staying through the weekend, but maybe we could figure something out. I hung up before he could finish. The rejection was too much to bear on top of everything else. My husband had left me, and my son had chosen his in-laws over his own mother in her moment of crisis. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't stay in that house a moment longer. I grabbed my purse, not even bothering to pack a bag, and drove. With no destination in mind, I just drove, eventually finding myself parked outside James and Vanessa's farmhouse, watching the warm glow of their windows, seeing the silhouettes of people moving about inside, laughing, celebrating, while I sat, alone in the dark, my life in shambles. That's where I am now. Sitting in my car, watching the life I'm not part of through windows that might as well be a million miles away. My son's words echoing in my ears. Tonight is just not good timing. I wonder if he realizes there's never a good time to have your world fall apart. Never a convenient moment to face the terrifying prospect of starting over at 60. As I sit here, a strange calm begins to replace my panic. Maybe it's shock. Maybe it's the beginning of acceptance. Or maybe it's the first stirring of something else entirely. The realization that if my family can so easily move on without me, perhaps it's time I learn to move on without them. I start the car. It's time to go. Not back to the empty house that was once a home, but somewhere else. Somewhere new. I don't know where yet, but for the first time in decades, the decision is entirely my own. That night, I didn't go home. Couldn't face the emptiness of the house that had been the center of my world for 3 decades. Instead, I drove to the Riverside Inn, a modest hotel on the edge of town where no one would think to look for me. The young woman at the front desk barely glanced at my tear-stained face as she handed me the key to room 214, a blessing for which I was grateful. The room was clean but impersonal. Beige walls, generic landscape art, a bed with 2 stiff sheets. I sat on the edge of the mattress, still in my coat, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. A 60-year-old woman with smudged mascara and disheveled gray-streaked hair looked back at me. A stranger. I hadn't packed a bag in my hasty exit, so I had nothing but the clothes on my back and my purse. No toothbrush, no nightgown, no change of clothes for tomorrow. The practical problems of my new reality were already piling up, but they felt distant, compared to the emotional earthquake that had just destroyed the landscape of my life. My phone buzzed on the bed beside me. Emily. My daughter must have heard from James by now. Mom? Her voice was tight with concern when I answered. Where are you? James just called me. He said Dad left and you took off? I'm fine, I lied, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm at a hotel. I just needed some space to think. A hotel? Mom, that's ridiculous. You should have called me. You're an hour away, Emily, and you have the kids and work tomorrow. It's fine, really. She sighed, a sound so like her father that it made my chest ache. What happened with Dad? James was pretty vague. He wants a divorce, I said flatly. Apparently, he's been planning it for weeks. He already has an apartment. Downtown. A sharp intake of breath. Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. But why didn't you stay at James's? He said you called but then hung up on him. The memory of my son's rejection stung afresh. He didn't want me there. They have company. Vanessa's parents. I'm sure he didn't mean... He meant it, Emily. I interrupted, suddenly too tired for pretense. He made it very clear that I would be an inconvenience. That doesn't sound like James. No? Did you know Vanessa is pregnant? Did you know her parents have been in town for a week helping them set up the nursery? Because I just found out today, completely by accident. A pause. Too long, then... Yes, I knew. James told me last weekend. The betrayal cut deep. I see. And you didn't think to tell me I was going to be a grandmother? He asked me not to, Mom. He said they wanted to tell you and Dad together, in person. While Vanessa's entire family already knew and was celebrating, I said bitterly. Some things never change, do they? What does that mean? I closed my eyes, suddenly overwhelmed by memories that had been bubbling just beneath the surface. Remember when James graduated from college? How he invited Meredith's parents to stay at our house, but we had to put you in a hotel because there wasn't enough room? Meredith had been James's college girlfriend, a relationship that had ended shortly after graduation. But the memory was still vivid. Mom, that was years ago, Emily protested. Or his law school graduation dinner. How he seated us at a different table from his roommates and their families. Or his wedding, where Vanessa's parents were involved in every decision, but I was told not to worry about a thing. That's not fair. Vanessa is their only daughter. Of course they wanted to be involved. And I'm his only mother, I said quietly, but that's never seemed to matter much to him. The line went quiet. I could almost see Emily's frown, her fingers worrying the ends of her hair the way she had since childhood when she was conflicted. Mom, she finally said, her voice gentler now. I think you've had a shock. 2 shocks, actually. You're not thinking clearly. Why don't I come get you tomorrow after I drop the kids at school? You can stay with us for a few days. The offer was kind, but something in me resisted. I appreciate that, honey, but I think I need some time alone first. To process everything. Are you sure? I don't like the idea of you alone in a hotel. I'm 60, not 90, I reminded her, attempting a lightness I didn't feel. I'll be fine. I'll call you tomorrow. After we hung up, I finally took off my coat and shoes and lay back on the bed, staring at the textured ceiling. My mind was a carousel of memories, spinning faster and faster. Not just recent disappointments, but a pattern stretching back years, decades even. How many times had I rearranged my schedule to accommodate Rob's work emergencies? How many school plays and recitals had I attended alone because he couldn't get away from the office? How many vacations had been canceled or postponed because something always came up? And James, my firstborn, the son I'd doted on, whose needs I'd always put first. When had he started pulling away? When had I become an afterthought in his life? I remembered his high school graduation, how he'd been embarrassed when I tried to hug him in front of his friends, how he'd quickly moved away to stand with them for photos, leaving me standing awkwardly alone until Rob finally arrived, late as usual, just as the ceremony was ending. Or college move-in day, when he'd practically pushed us out of his dorm room, eager for us to leave so he could start his new life without parental supervision. I'd cried the whole way home, and Rob had patted my hand absently, telling me it was natural, that children grow up and move on. At the time, I'd accepted these moments as normal phases of life, the inevitable letting go that all parents face. But now, lying in this anonymous hotel room with my life in shambles, I saw them differently. They weren't isolated incidents. They were waypoints on a map, a clear path leading to this moment of complete rejection. The realization brought fresh tears, but also a strange clarity. This hadn't happened overnight. The foundation of my family relationships had been crumbling for years, eroded by neglect. Not just theirs, but perhaps mine too. I had been so busy being the perfect wife, the supportive mother, the dependable backbone of our family that I'd failed to notice how insubstantial those roles had become. My phone buzzed again. A text from James this time. Mom, just checking you're okay. Emily said you're at a hotel? Let me know if you need anything. The formal politeness of it, the careful distance in his words, told me everything I needed to know. He was checking the box of filial concern without actually offering meaningful help. I didn't reply. Instead, I forced myself up from the bed and into the bathroom. The harsh fluorescent light was unforgiving, highlighting every line and shadow on my face. I looked older than my 60 years tonight. Tired. Defeated. I washed my face with the tiny bar of hotel soap, scrubbing away the remnants of my makeup and the salt tracks of my tears. Without my usual skincare products, my skin felt tight and dry afterward, another small discomfort in a day filled with much larger ones. As I was drying my face with a rough hotel towel, my wedding ring caught on a thread. I stared at the gold band that had been on my finger for 35 years. It felt suddenly foreign, like an artifact from someone else's life. In a sudden, decisive movement, I twisted it off and placed it on the bathroom counter. The pale indentation it left behind was a ghost of the life I'd thought was mine. Back in the bedroom, I realized I had nothing to sleep in. After a moment's hesitation, I stripped down to my underwear and slipped between the sheets, shivering despite the room's adequate heating. I hadn't slept alone in a strange bed since before I met Rob. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rob's face as he told me he was leaving. Or James's expression when he refused to let me stay. Or the image of Vanessa's parents, gathered around the dinner table, celebrating the news of a grandchild while I remained in ignorance. By morning, I had perhaps dozed for an hour or two at most. My eyes were gritty, my body aching from tension. The hotel room looked even more depressing in the cold light of day, the beige walls sallow, the carpet stained in places I hadn't noticed the night before. I put on yesterday's clothes, grimacing at the wrinkles, and tried to make myself presentable, with just my fingers to comb my hair. The result was less than impressive, but it would have to do. I needed toiletries, a change of clothes, and most importantly, a plan. The hotel offered a basic continental breakfast, which I forced myself to eat despite having no appetite. Coffee, at least, was a blessing, and I savored 2 cups while I considered my options. I couldn't stay at the hotel indefinitely. It was too expensive, and besides, I needed my things. Going home was inevitable, but the thought made my stomach clench. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face that empty house. My phone, which I'd left on silent overnight, showed a series of missed calls and texts when I finally checked it. 2 more from James, increasingly concerned. 3 from Emily, verging on frantic. 1 from Rob, terse and practical. We need to talk about next steps. Call me when you're ready. None of them felt urgent enough to respond to immediately. Instead, I drove to the nearest department store and bought the essentials. Toiletries, underwear, a change of clothes. Simple, practical items chosen with little thought beyond necessity. In the past, shopping had sometimes been a pleasure, a small indulgence. Today, it was just another task to complete, a problem to solve. Back at the hotel, I showered and changed, feeling marginally more human afterward. My phone continued to buzz occasionally, but I ignored it. For the first time in decades, I was answering to no one but myself. The freedom was terrifying. Around noon, a knock at my door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I peered through the peephole to see Emily standing in the hallway, her expression a mixture of worry and determination. I opened the door. "How did you find me?" "I called every hotel in Riverside," she admitted, pushing past me into the room. 8 calls. You're at the 8th hotel I tried." The effort touched me, though I wasn't ready to admit it. "I told you I needed some time alone." "And I decided that was a terrible idea," she countered, taking in the sparse hotel room with a critical eye. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Pack your things. You're coming home with me." "I don't have anything to pack." I gestured to the small shopping bag containing my minimal purchases. "And I'm not coming home with you, Emily. I appreciate the offer, but no." She looked genuinely confused by my refusal. "Why not? You can't stay here." "Actually, I can. I'm an adult woman with a credit card and the ability to make my own decisions." My tone was sharper than I'd intended, and Emily flinched slightly. I know that. I just want to help. I softened, remembering that she was hurting too. Her father had just walked out. Her family was fracturing. I know you do, sweetheart. But the best way to help right now is to respect that I need space. She sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Dad called me this morning. My heart clenched. Oh? He's worried about you. Said you weren't answering his calls. I'm not ready to talk to him yet. He says it's important. Something about finances, making sure you have access to everything you need. Of course, practical Rob, making sure all the boxes were checked as he dismantled our life together. I'll call him when I'm ready. Emily sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. This isn't like you, Mom. Hiding out in a hotel, ignoring calls, refusing help. You're always the one who holds everything together. Her words struck a nerve. Maybe that's the problem. What do you mean? I sat beside her on the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the need to make her understand. All these years, I've been the one making everything work. Planning the holidays, maintaining the house, keeping up with everyone's schedules, remembering birthdays, organizing family gatherings. Even when you and James were grown and gone, I was the one who made sure we all stayed connected. I called, I visited, I arranged, and somewhere along the way it became expected, invisible, like breathing. Emily looked uncomfortable. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time your father called just to check in? Or James came by the house without being invited for a specific occasion? When was the last time anyone in this family did the work of maintaining our relationships except me? She had no immediate answer, which was answer enough. And now, I continued, now that I'm the one who needs support, who needs someone else to hold things together for a change, what happens? Your father walks out, your brother turns me away, and you're here. Yes, but you're already trying to fit me into a plan, to fix the problem, to restore the status quo. That's not fair, Emily protested. I'm trying to help. By taking me to your house, where I'd sleep in your guest room, try not to disrupt your routine, put on a brave face for the children, and pretend everything is fine? Where I'd have to be Grandma Maggie instead of just Maggie, a woman whose life has just imploded. Tears filled Emily's eyes. Is that so terrible? No, I admitted, softening again. It's not terrible. It's kind, and I love you for it. But it's not what I need right now. Then what do you need? Tell me, and I'll do it. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. I need time. Time to figure out who I am without your father. Without the roles that have defined me for so long. I need to face what's happened and decide what comes next on my own terms. She wiped at her eyes with her free hand. I'm scared for you, Mom. I know. I'm scared too. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time I felt something real, even if it's frightening. We sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped between us. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice small. I didn't know you were unhappy. The statement caught me off guard. I wasn't. Not exactly. I was. I was comfortable, content even. But I think I stopped expecting more than that a long time ago. And Dad? Did he stop expecting more, too? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. We never talked about it. That's part of the problem, I think. Somewhere along the way, we stopped really talking. We discussed schedules and bills and whose turn it was to call the plumber, but not what we wanted from life, not what made us happy or sad or afraid. That sounds lonely, Emily said softly. It was, I admitted, the realization dawning on me even as I spoke the words. It is. I've been lonely for a very long time. The truth of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. Despite being surrounded by family, despite the constant activity of maintaining our lives and relationships, I had been profoundly alone. Rob and I had been living parallel lives, moving in the same direction but never truly intersecting. And my children had grown up and created their own worlds where I was welcome as an occasional visitor, but never a full participant. "I should have noticed," Emily said, squeezing my hand. "I'm sorry." "It's not your job to notice, honey. I'm the parent, remember? You're also a person, with needs and feelings that matter." Her words brought fresh tears to my eyes. When was the last time anyone had acknowledged that? When was the last time I had acknowledged it myself? "Thank you for that," I whispered. Emily stayed a while longer. We talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. About her marriage, her children, her work as a third-grade teacher. About my fears for the future and her worries for me. It was honest and raw and occasionally painful, but it felt like the first real connection I'd had in longer than I could remember. When she finally left, promising to call that evening, I felt both drained and strangely energized. A weight had been lifted, not the entire burden of my situation, but some significant portion of it. I spent the rest of the day in quiet reflection, sometimes crying, sometimes jotting down thoughts in the small notepad provided by the hotel. By evening, I had reached several conclusions. First, I needed to go home, not to the house I'd shared. With Rob, that wasn't home anymore, but to myself, to the woman I'd been before I became Mrs. Robert Wilson, before I was mom or grandma or any of the other roles that had consumed my identity. Second, I needed to be honest. With myself, with my family, with everyone in my life. No more swallowing hurt to keep the peace, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And third, I needed to rebuild. Not just my life circumstances, but my sense of self, my worth beyond what I could do for others. I called Rob that evening, keeping the conversation brief, and focused on practicalities. Yes, I was safe. No, I didn't want to meet yet to discuss divorce details. Yes, I would be returning to the house tomorrow to collect some of my things. No, I didn't expect him to be there when I did. He sounded relieved that I wasn't falling apart, which only confirmed my growing suspicion that he had expected me to. That he had prepared himself for hysterics, for begging, for the emotional collapse of the woman who had always been the stable center of our family. The fact that I was holding myself together seemed to unsettle him more than if I had been a wreck. Good. Let him be unsettled. Let him wonder what else he might have misjudged about me. I called James next. The conversation was stilted, formal in a way that conversations with one's child should never be. "I'm fine," I assured him before he could ask. "I just wanted to let you know that I'll be getting a more permanent place soon. A fresh start." "Mom, you don't have to leave your house," he protested. "Dad's the one who walked out." "It's not my house anymore," I said simply. "It hasn't been for a long time. It's just a place where I lived." "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. I'm considering my options." A pause. "I'm sorry about last night. I should have handled it better." The apology was perfunctory, offered out of obligation rather than genuine remorse. I could almost picture him, phone to his ear, one eye on whatever else he was doing at the moment. "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not making it easier for him. "But it showed me something important, so in a way, I'm grateful." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes we need to see the truth clearly before we can move forward. And now I see it." "See what?" There was an edge of defensiveness in his voice now. "That I've been living my life for other people for so long that I forgot to live it for myself. That I've been pouring my heart into relationships that didn't value it. That I've been settling for crumbs when I deserved a feast. Mom, that's not fair. We love you. I know you do, in your way. But love isn't just a feeling, James. It's actions. It's showing up when someone needs you. It's making room in your life for them, not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's not. You're talking about last night. I told you it was bad timing. It's never been good timing for me in your life, has it? Not really. Not when it mattered. His silence was telling. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I continued, softening my tone. I'm saying it because it's true, and because both of us deserve the truth. I deserve to acknowledge it, and you deserve to hear it. So what now? He asked, his voice tight. You're just going to disappear? Start a new life without us? No, I'm going to start a new life for me. Whether you and your father are part of it depends on you. The door will be open, but I won't be standing in the doorway anymore, waiting and hoping. I'll be living my life, and you'll be welcome in it if you choose to be there. On new terms. After we hung up, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The conversation had been difficult but necessary. A first step toward whatever came next. I made one final call that night, to a realtor I'd met through my volunteer work at the community center. Karen was around my age, divorced herself 10 years earlier, and had reinvented her life after her marriage ended. She answered on the second ring. Maggie, what a surprise. How are you? Actually, I'm getting divorced, I said, the words still strange on my tongue. And I need a new place to live. Something small, just for me. I was hoping you might have some ideas. There was a brief pause, then Karen's voice warmed with understanding. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. And yes, of course I have ideas. In fact, I might have the perfect place. How about I pick you up tomorrow and show you? For the first time in 2 days, I felt a flicker of genuine excitement. That would be wonderful. Great. And afterward, we'll have lunch and you can tell me everything, or nothing, whatever you need. After we said goodbye, I sat on the hotel bed, staring at the notepad where I'd been jotting my thoughts. On a fresh page, I wrote 3 words. Recognition of patterns. Below it, I began a list of all the ways I had allowed myself to become invisible in my own life. All the times I had swallowed hurt to keep the peace. All the relationships where I gave more than I received. All the dreams I had set aside for others' convenience. The list grew longer than I had expected. By the time I finished, 2 hours had passed, and my hand was cramped from writing. But my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I tore out the pages and folded them carefully, placing them in my purse. Then I turned out the light and lay down to sleep. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't set an alarm. Tomorrow would come when it came, and I would face it on my own terms. For tonight, that was enough. Karen arrived at the hotel promptly at 10 the next morning, her silver SUV gleaming in the pale autumn sunlight. She greeted me with a warm hug that caught me off guard. We had been friendly but never close. Yet I found myself leaning into it, starved for genuine human connection. You look better than I expected, she said, stepping back to assess me with kind but shrewd eyes. When my ex left, I didn't brush my hair for a week. I laughed despite myself. Don't be too impressed. I bought these clothes yesterday at Target, and this is the best I could do with hotel shampoo and no conditioner. Well, it's working for you. She opened the passenger door for me. Ready for a fresh start? The question felt monumental, but I nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. As we drove through Riverside, I felt like a tourist in my own town, seeing it with new eyes. Streets I'd traveled for decades suddenly seemed full of possibilities I'd never noticed. Karen kept up a gentle stream of conversation, carefully avoiding direct questions about Rob or the divorce, for which I was grateful. I have 3 places to show you, she explained as we turned onto Pine Street, a charming area full of older homes and mature trees. All rentals for now, I'm guessing you'll want to see how the divorce shakes out before buying anything. That makes sense, I agreed, though I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. The idea of buying a home on my own was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first property was a small bungalow with a deep front porch and cheerful yellow door. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, just renovated last year, Karen explained as she unlocked the door. The owner is a client of mine who's been transferred to Seattle for work. He's looking for a tenant who'll take good care of the place. Inside, the house was bright and airy, with hardwood floors, a cozy living room, and a compact but updated kitchen. The main bedroom was just large enough for a queen-sized bed and dresser, with a window overlooking a small backyard with an ancient oak tree. The second bedroom was even smaller, barely fitting a desk and bookshelf, but it had wonderful morning light. It's lovely, I said, genuinely meaning it. But, Karen prompted, hearing the hesitation in my voice. I shrugged. It's a family home. I can feel it. It's waiting for children's laughter, for someone to build memories here. That's not me anymore. She nodded, understanding. Let's try the next one. The second property was a downtown apartment in a converted historic building, all exposed brick and industrial chic. It was stylish, centrally located, and utterly wrong for me. Too cold, I said simply, and Karen didn't argue. The third property, however, caught my breath the moment we pulled up. It was an in-law suite attached to a gracious Victorian home on Maple Avenue, with its own private entrance and small garden patio. The owners, Karen explained, were a retired couple who'd built the addition for her mother, who had passed away 6 months ago. Eleanor and Henry are particular about who they rent to, Karen warned as we approached the door. They want someone quiet, respectful of privacy, theirs and their own, but also someone they wouldn't mind sharing a cup of tea with occasionally. The space was perfect, a large studio with defined living, sleeping, and kitchen areas, separated by thoughtful placement of furniture rather than walls. A bay window faced east, promising beautiful morning light. The bathroom was surprisingly spacious with a clawfoot tub deep enough for a proper soak. French doors opened onto the private patio, where potted herbs still thrived in the mild autumn weather. What do you think? Karen asked, watching my face. It feels like possibility, I said softly, like I could breathe here. We met, Eleanor and Henry over tea in their part of the house, a gracious formal living room that somehow managed to feel cozy despite its high ceilings and antique furniture. They were kind but direct, asking about my work, part-time at the library, my interests, gardening, reading, recently considering taking up watercolor painting, and my reasons for moving, at which point I simply said, I'm getting divorced. After 35 years, and they both nodded with perfect understanding. By the time we left, I had signed a 6-month lease beginning the following week, with the option to extend if the arrangement worked for everyone. That was easier than I expected, I confessed to Karen as we drove to lunch. I thought finding a place would take weeks. Sometimes the universe aligns, she replied with a smile, and sometimes a good realtor knows exactly what her client needs. Over lunch at a small cafe I'd never visited despite its proximity to the library where I worked, Karen finally asked the question I'd been dreading. So what happened? I took a sip of my iced tea, organizing my thoughts. The short version? My husband decided he needed to find himself at 62, and my son made it clear I'm an inconvenience when I asked to stay with him after getting the news. Karen winced. And the long version? The long version is that I've spent 35 years being a wife and mother who prioritized everyone else's needs above my own, and now I'm paying the price for it. That's not a price, Maggie. That's liberation. I looked up, startled by her certainty. I know it doesn't feel that way now, she continued, her eyes softening. It feels like the ground has been ripped out from under you. But trust me when I say that a year from now, maybe even less, you'll look back on this moment as the beginning of the best chapter of your life. How can you be so sure? Because I've lived it. When David left me for his 28-year-old assistant, I thought my life was over. I was 53 with adult children who were busy with their own lives, no career to speak of, and an identity completely wrapped up in being Mrs. David Harrington. Sound familiar? I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in my throat. The first few months were hell, Karen admitted. I cried, I raged. I made some questionable decisions involving box wine and late-night online shopping. But then something amazing happened. What? I whispered. I remembered who I was before. I was David's wife. The woman who had dreams and opinions and a wicked sense of humor. The woman who wanted to travel and learn Italian and maybe start her own business someday. And slowly, I started becoming her again. Or rather, a new version of her. Shaped by everything I'd experienced but not defined by it. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. The possibility that this crushing pain might eventually lead to something positive seemed remote, but Karen's presence, vibrant, confident, happy, was living proof that it was possible. I can't imagine feeling that way, I confessed. You don't have to imagine it, she replied, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You just have to keep moving forward, one day at a time, until you arrive there naturally. After lunch, Karen drove me to my house. Rob's in my house, I corrected myself mentally, so I could pack some essentials to tide me over until moving day. She offered to come in with me, but I declined. This was something I needed to face alone. The house was quiet when I entered. No sign of Rob having returned since his dramatic exit. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Coffee mug still in the sink, thrown there in my hasty departure. A book open on the side table by my reading chair, mail stacked neatly on the kitchen counter. I moved through the rooms slowly, seeing them with new eyes. This space that had been the center of my world for decades suddenly felt like a museum of someone else's life. The formal living room we'd used only for holiday gatherings, the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals, the family room where we'd watched movies and played board games when the children were young. Upstairs, I paused in the doorway of our bedroom, Rob's and mine. The king-sized bed we'd purchased 15 years ago when Rob complained about my restless sleeping. His side perfectly made, he'd always been tidier than me. Mine still rumpled from my last morning there. His closet door closed, mine slightly ajar, a sleeve from a sweater caught in it. I moved to the closet and opened it, fully taking in my carefully organized clothes. Who was the woman who wore these sensible slacks, these muted cardigans, these comfortable shoes? Had I always dressed so invisibly? I pulled out a suitcase from the back of the closet and began packing, focusing on practicalities. Enough. Clothes for 2 weeks, toiletries, medications, a few books I was currently reading, my laptop and charger. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection in the mirror over the sink. The same face that had looked back at me in the hotel, but somehow different. Less shocked, perhaps. Less devastated. Not healed, not even close, but present. Here. Surviving. As I was zipping up the suitcase, I heard the front door open and close. Footsteps in the hallway, then Rob's voice calling up the stairs. Maggie, are you here? Your car's in the driveway. My heart hammered in my chest. I wasn't ready for this confrontation, hadn't prepared what to say, but there was no avoiding it now. I'm up here, I called back, my voice steadier than I expected. His footsteps on the stairs, then he appeared in the doorway looking disheveled and tired. He'd always been handsome in a distinguished way, salt and pepper hair that had been more salt than pepper for years now, kind blue eyes behind rimless glasses, a trim build maintained through regular tennis games. But now he looked older, diminished, somehow. Emily said you were coming by to get some things, he said, his eyes falling on the suitcase. Are you? How are you? The genuine concern in his voice sparked an unexpected flare of anger. "How do you think I am, Rob? My husband of 35 years walked out without warning, and my son rejected me when I needed him most. I'm just peachy." He flinched, rubbing a hand over his face. "I know this is hard. I never wanted to hurt you." "What did you think would happen? That I'd thank you for setting me free? Congratulate you on your courage?" "I thought you'd understand," he said quietly. "Deep down, I thought you must feel it too. The emptiness, the sense that there should be more to life than this comfortable routine we'd fallen into." His words hit closer to home than I cared to admit. Hadn't I just been realizing how lonely I'd been, even within our marriage? But that didn't excuse his actions. "The difference," I said, my voice tight with controlled emotion, "is that I made a commitment to work through the hard times, to face the emptiness together if that's what we were feeling. You decided to solve your midlife crisis by blowing up our entire life without even giving me a chance to be part of the conversation." "It's not a midlife crisis," he protested. "What would you call it then? Suddenly deciding at 62 that you need to find yourself? Please." He sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "I've been unhappy for a long time, Maggie. Years. I tried to talk to you about it, but you were always so busy. With the kids, with your committees, with keeping everything running perfectly. There never seemed to be space for my feelings." The accusation stung, partly because there was a grain of truth to it. I had been busy, had perhaps used that busyness to avoid deeper issues. "You could have tried harder," I said, but the fight was going out of my voice. "You could have insisted we talk, get counseling, something. Instead, you just gave up." "Maybe I did," he admitted. "Maybe that makes me a coward. But I couldn't face the thought of another 10, 20 years of this quiet desperation, of waking up every day feeling like I'm living someone else's life." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of decades between us. Finally, I zipped up the suitcase and lifted it off the bed. "I've found a place," I told him. "I'll be moving in next week. In the meantime, I'm staying with a friend." A small lie. I was going back to the hotel, but one that preserved my dignity. "You don't have to leave," Rob said quickly. "This is your home. I'm the one who should go." "This hasn't been my home for a long time," I replied, echoing what I'd told James. "It's just a house where I lived." He looked pained. "Maggie, I need to go." I moved past him toward the stairs, suitcase in hand. "Wait," he called, after me. "We need to talk about practical things. The house, finances, the divorce process. I've spoken to a mediator who specializes in amicable separations. She could meet with us next week." I paused on the landing, looking back at him. "Amicable? Is that what you think this is?" "I'm hoping it can be," he said, and I could see the genuine hope in his eyes. "For both our sakes." "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Text me the details, and I'll let you know." As I drove away from the house, I felt a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite sort through. Relief at having survived the first confrontation. Anger still simmering beneath the surface. A surprising tinge of empathy for Rob, who was clearly struggling in his own way. And beneath it all, a quiet determination that was entirely new. Karen had invited me to stay with her until I could move into the in-law suite, but I declined, returning instead to the Riverside Inn. I needed the neutral space, the anonymity, the freedom to fall apart if necessary without worrying about being a good guest. That evening, I opened my laptop for the first time since the world had shifted on its axis. Dozens of emails awaited me, most of them insignificant. Sales announcements, newsletters, updates from various committees I served on. But one caught my eye, a reminder from the community center about the watercolor class I'd impulsively signed up for months ago and then promptly forgotten about. The class was starting tomorrow evening. On impulse, I replied to confirm my attendance. Then I checked my online banking, relieved to see that Rob hadn't emptied our joint accounts. In fact, he'd deposited his recent paycheck as usual. Tippy. Least I wouldn't have to worry about money immediately. I made a mental note to open my own account soon and transfer what I considered my fair share of our joint savings. My phone rang as I was scrolling through restaurant delivery options. Too tired to contemplate going out for dinner, James's name lit up the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but then decided to answer. Time to practice those boundaries. Hello, James. Mom. His voice was tentative. How are you doing? I'm managing, I replied, neither hostile nor particularly warm. What can I do for you? The formality of my tone clearly caught him off guard. I wanted to check in, see if you needed anything. That's thoughtful, but I'm fine. I've found a new place to live, and I'll be moving in next week. Moving? Mom, don't you think you're rushing things? You and Dad might still work it out. I almost laughed at the naivete of his assumption. That's not going to happen, James. And even if by some miracle it did, I'd still want my own place. This separation has made some things very clear to me. What things? His voice had taken on a defensive edge. That I've spent far too long defining myself through other people's needs and expectations. That it's time I figured out who I am and what I want. This doesn't sound like you, Mom. Maybe it doesn't sound like the mother you've known, but it sounds exactly like the woman I'm becoming. A pause, then. Vanessa and I were talking. We feel terrible about the other night. We want to make it up to you. Come for dinner on Saturday. We can talk properly, and you can see the nursery. Vanessa's parents went home yesterday. The invitation was a peace offering. I recognized that. But it came with an unspoken expectation that I would slip back into my usual role. The accommodating mother, the doting future grandmother, the woman who never made waves or demanded to be prioritized. I appreciate the invitation, I said carefully, but I'm not available Saturday. Oh. His surprise was evident. What about Sunday? I'm not available then either. Mom, are you punishing me for the other night? Because that's not fair. I already explained that it was bad timing. And there it was. The assumption that my unavailability could only be explained as a petty response to his rejection, not as a genuine prioritization of my own needs and schedule. I'm not punishing you, James. I'm establishing boundaries. When I'm ready to visit, I'll let you know. In the meantime, I wish you and Vanessa well with the pregnancy. I'm genuinely happy for you both. So you're just going to shut us out? Your own family? No. I'm creating space to heal and rebuild my life. There's a difference. Dad was right, he muttered. You're not yourself. The comment stung, but I refused to let it derail my newfound resolve. Your father doesn't know who I am anymore. I'm not sure he ever did. And with all due respect, neither do you. After we hung up, I sat on the hotel bed, heart racing. Had I been too harsh? Perhaps. But the conversation had confirmed what I'd been realizing over the past few days. My relationships had been built on an uneven foundation, with me always expected to bend, to accommodate, to put others first. No more. It was time for reciprocity, time for mutual respect, time for genuine connection rather than obligatory interactions dictated by familial roles. I ordered Thai food from a place I'd always wanted to try, but Rob had dismissed as too exotic, watched a documentary about female artists in their later years, and fell asleep without setting an alarm again. The next morning, I drove to the bank and opened my own checking and savings accounts, transferring half of our joint savings and setting up direct deposit for my library paychecks. The banker, a young woman named Tara, was efficient and non-judgmental. When I explained my situation, "You're doing the right thing," she assured me. "Financial independence is crucial in situations like yours." Next, I visited my doctor to get my own health insurance sorted out, rather than continuing as a dependent on Rob's plan. And then, feeling bold, I stopped at a salon I'd passed 100 times, but never entered. I want something different, I told the stylist, a young man with artistic flair evident in his own expertly colored hair. Something that feels like me. He studied my face, my hair, shoulder length, conservatively styled, highlighted every 6 weeks at the place. Rob's sister had recommended decades ago. "And who is me?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. He smiled. "Then let's create some possibilities." 2 hours later, I emerged with a chic bob that framed my face in a way that made my cheekbones more pronounced, my eyes more striking. The color was richer, warmer, with subtle copper highlights that caught the light when I moved. I looked visible, present, impossible to ignore. On impulse, I stopped at a boutique on my way back to the hotel, drawn in by a display featuring a mannequin in a vibrant teal dress. Inside, I found myself gravitating toward colors and styles I'd always admired but never considered me. Fitted jackets in jewel tones, silk scarves with bold patterns, a pair of ankle boots with just enough heel to add confidence to my stride. The saleswoman approached as I was fingering a soft cashmere sweater in a shade of plum I'd never have considered before. "That color would be beautiful with your complexion and hair," she commented. "You think so? It's not too much?" She looked at me with genuine surprise. "Too much? Absolutely not. It's perfect. Sophisticated but with personality. Exactly like you." Her words, "exactly like you," lingered as I made my purchases and returned to the hotel. Exactly like me. But who was that exactly? I was still figuring it out. Piece by piece, choice by choice. That evening, I arrived at the community center for the watercolor class feeling both nervous and exhilarated. I'd changed into one of my new purchases, the plum sweater paired with black pants and the ankle boots, and caught sight of myself in the reflection of the center's glass doors as I approached. The woman looking back at me seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign. The class was small, just 8 students ranging in age from a college student to an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as Arthur, a retired English professor. The instructor, Maya, was a serene woman in her 40s with paint-splattered jeans and a relaxed teaching style that immediately put me at ease. "Watercolor is about surrender," she explained as we arranged our materials. "You can guide the paint, suggest a direction, but ultimately, water does what water wants to do. The magic happens when you learn to work with its nature, rather than fighting against it." As we began our first exercise, simply exploring how the water and pigment interacted on the paper, I found myself deeply absorbed in the process. The way colors bloomed and blended, the unpredictable beauty of water finding its own path across the page. There was a metaphor there, I realized, about my own life taking unexpected turns, about finding beauty in the unplanned and uncontrolled. "You have a natural sensitivity to the medium," Maya commented, pausing behind me. "Your touch is light but intentional. That's rare in beginners." The compliment warmed me. When was the last time someone had praised me for something that was purely about me, not about what I did for others? After class, Arthur invited several of us to join him for coffee at the cafe next door. Surprisingly, I found myself accepting. The old Maggie would have hurried home to make sure Rob had dinner, to tidy up, to squeeze in a load of laundry before bed. But Rob wasn't waiting. The house wasn't mine to tidy, and the only laundry I had to worry about was my own, safely back at the hotel. The conversation flowed easily as we sipped our drinks and shared stories about what had brought us to the class. Arthur had taken it up after his wife's death 2 years ago, finding solace in the careful attention it required. Jenna, the college student, was an architecture major who wanted to develop her rendering skills. And Luis, a nurse at Riverside General, was there on his therapist's recommendation as a stress management technique. When it was my turn, I hesitated, then decided on honesty. My husband left me 3 days ago, ending our 35-year marriage. And my son made it clear I'm not a priority in his life, so I'm rebuilding, figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by other people. The silence that followed wasn't awkward or pitying, but respectful. Then Arthur raised his coffee cup in a small salute. "To new beginnings," he said simply. "To new beginnings," we echoed. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who asked nothing of me but my presence, I felt the first real spark of hope that life after devastation might hold unexpected joys. The week that followed settled into a rhythm entirely unlike my previous life. Mornings spent handling practical matters, meeting with a divorce attorney, not Rob's suggested mediator, but someone recommended by Karen who specialized in protecting women's interests in late-life divorces, setting up utilities for my new place, sorting through financial records. Afternoons devoted to small pleasures, visits to the botanical garden I'd always meant to explore, long walks by the river, browsing bookstores without watching the time, and evenings filled with new experiences, the watercolor class, a poetry reading at the library where I worked, a documentary film screening at the community college. At each event, I met people, had conversations that weren't centered on family obligations or household management. I was just Maggie, not Mom, not Mrs. Wilson, not the committee chairperson or the reliable volunteer. Rob texted daily, his messages increasingly puzzled by my lack of distress, my unwillingness to meet and discuss reconciliation. "We should talk," he'd write. "I'm worried about you." Or, "Emily says you've cut your hair. I'd like to see it." I responded politely but briefly, establishing the new terms of our relationship. "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." "Yes, I've made some changes. They suit me. I'll be ready to discuss divorce details next week after I've consulted with my attorney." James called twice more, each time with a dinner invitation that I declined with varying excuses. His frustration was evident in our last conversation. "You can't avoid us forever," he said, his voice tight. "We're still your family." "I'm not avoiding you," I replied calmly. "I'm prioritizing myself for the first time in decades. There's a difference." "Well, when will you have time for us in this new self-centered life of yours?" The question was meant to sting, to shame me back into my familiar role, but I refused to take the bait. When our relationship can be balanced and mutual, rather than one-sided. When I'm valued as a person, not just as a convenience. When you're ready to truly see me, not just the role I've played in your life. The silence that followed was profound. Then, quietly, "I don't even know what that means." "I know you don't," I said, softening slightly. "That's part of the problem, but I hope someday you will." Emily was more understanding, especially after I invited her to lunch at a cafe near her school. She arrived looking worried, clearly expecting to find me falling apart. Instead, she found me looking more vibrant than I had in years, dressed in colors she'd never seen me wear, sporting a hairstyle that made me look a decade younger. "Mom?" she said, momentarily confused as I waved from my table. "You look amazing." "Thank you," I replied, standing to hug her. "I feel not amazing yet, but getting there." Over lunch, I told her about the in-law suite, the watercolor class, the new people I was meeting. She listened with growing wonder, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "It's like you're a different person," she said finally. "Not different," I corrected gently. "Just more fully myself. Parts of me that got buried under years of being what everyone else needed me to be are finally getting some air." "I never realized," she began, then stopped. "Never realized what?" that you weren't happy, that you were giving so much of yourself away. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I didn't realize it either, not consciously. And I don't regret the love and care I gave to you and James and your father. I just wish I'd kept more of it for myself along the way. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I want to know this version of you, Mom. The real you. Those words, so simple but so profound, broke something open in my heart. I'd like that very much, I whispered. I'm still getting to know her myself. As moving day approached, I found myself increasingly excited rather than anxious. Karen helped me shop for a few essentials, a new bedding set in peaceful blues and greens, some kitchen basics, a comfortable reading chair for the bay window. I didn't want to take much from the house I'd shared with Rob, preferring to start fresh with items that were truly mine, chosen with only my preferences in mind. The day before I was set to move in, I received a text from James that caught me off guard. I found this while helping Vanessa sort through some old boxes. Thought you might want it. I can drop it at your hotel if you'll be there around 7. Curious, I agreed, wondering what he could possibly have found that would prompt this unexpected outreach. He arrived precisely at 7, looking uncomfortable but determined. In his hands was a small wooden box I recognized immediately. My college keepsake box, something I thought had been lost in our move to the Riverside house decades ago. Where did you find this? I asked, taking it reverently. It was mixed in with some of my old school projects in the attic. Vanessa and I were clearing space for baby things. He hesitated, then added, I opened it. I hope that's okay. I wanted to make sure what it was before bringing it over. I nodded, lifting the lid to reveal the contents. Letters from friends, ticket stubs from concerts and plays, a pressed flower from a bouquet, a small notebook filled with poetry I'd written in my early 20s, and photographs. So many photographs. Of a young woman with wild hair and wilder dreams, backpacking through Europe during a college semester abroad, protesting for causes she believed in, laughing with friends on beaches and mountainsides. That's you, James said softly, pointing to a photo of me standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, arms outstretched, face alight with joy. I almost didn't recognize you. You look so free. I was, I whispered, memories flooding back. I had such plans back then. I was going to write a novel, travel to every continent, make a difference in the world. What happened? The question wasn't accusatory. It was genuinely curious. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider it honestly. Life happened. I met your father, fell in love, got married. You and Emily came along, and somewhere, in the middle of mortgages and midnight feedings and making sure everyone had what they needed, I forgot about those dreams. Or convinced myself they didn't matter anymore. I'm sorry, James said, and I could tell he meant it. Don't be. I made my choices, and you and Emily were the best parts of those choices. I closed the box gently. But now I'm making new choices. For me. He nodded, looking uncertain. The other night, when you needed a place to stay, I should have been there for you. It was the closest to a genuine apology he'd offered, and I acknowledged it with a nod. Yes, you should. Have. I've never seen you need anything before, he admitted. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. It was easier to think of you that way, I guess. It was easier for everyone, I agreed, including me. But it wasn't true. I've always had needs and dreams and desires. I just buried them, so deeply that even I forgot they were there. We stood in silence for a moment, the box between us like a bridge to a past I'd almost forgotten, and a future still taking shape. I'd like to see your new place, James said finally. When you're ready, no pressure. It was a small step, but a significant one. He was asking to enter my new life on my terms, not demanding that I retain my place in his, on his terms. I'd like that, I said. Give me a few weeks to settle in and then we'll arrange something. After he left, I sat cross-legged on the hotel bed, the wooden box open before me, examining each item like an archaeologist uncovering an ancient civilization. In a way, that's exactly what I was doing, excavating the woman I'd been before. Life's compromises and responsibilities had buried her layer by layer. As I held a photograph of myself at 21, laughing into the camera with unguarded joy, I made a silent promise to that young woman. I would honor her dreams, her spirit, her fierce independence, even as I moved forward into this unexpected new chapter. I wouldn't abandon her again. Moving day arrived with unexpected sunshine, a rarity for Riverside in late October. I stood in the doorway of my new space, watching as Karen and Eleanor arranged the last of my modest belongings. The reading chair positioned perfectly in the bay window, my new dishes neatly stacked in kitchen cabinets, the watercolor supplies I'd purchased laid out on the small desk beneath the west-facing window. "It's coming together beautifully," Eleanor commented, smoothing the comforter on my new bed. In her 70s, with silver hair and remarkably few wrinkles, she moved with the unhurried grace of someone at peace with herself. I found myself hoping I might attain such serenity eventually. "Thank you both for helping," I said, feeling a curious mixture of emotions, gratitude, excitement, and a thread of anxiety about this first night truly on my own. The hotel had been transitional, temporary. This was my new reality. "We'll leave." "You to settle in," Karen said, intuitive as always. "But I'm just a phone call away if you need anything. And Eleanor and Henry are right through that door." She gestured toward the connecting door that led to the main house, though Eleanor had assured me it would remain locked, with each of us knocking if we needed to communicate. After they left, I wandered through my new home, touching surfaces, adjusting small details. The space was modest by most standards, just under 600 square feet, but felt luxurious in its simplicity. Nothing here that wasn't mine by choice. Nothing that carried complicated memories or obligations. I was unpacking my clothes, marveling at how few items I'd brought from my old life compared to the new pieces I'd purchased, when my phone rang. Rob's name appeared on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided against it. The new boundaries I was establishing weren't about avoidance but about engagement on different terms. "Hello, Rob." "Maggie." His voice sounded strained. "I'm at the house, your things. Many of them are gone." "I moved today," I replied simply. "I told you I would." "But so much is still here. Your books, your mother's china, your gardening supplies. Aren't you taking them?" "Eventually, perhaps. I'm starting with what I need, not what I've accumulated." He made a sound of frustration. "This isn't like you, Maggie. You're acting rashly." "No," I corrected gently. "I'm acting decisively. There's a difference. The mediator has an opening next Thursday at 2. I've tentatively scheduled us." I sighed, irritated by his presumption. "I won't be meeting with your mediator, Rob. I've retained my own attorney. She'll be contacting yours to arrange initial discussions." His silence spoke volumes. He'd expected me to follow his lead, as I had so often in our marriage. "An attorney? Maggie, that's so adversarial. I thought we could handle this amicably." "Protecting my interests isn't adversarial, it's prudent. And given that you made the unilateral decision to end our marriage, without discussion, you've forfeited the right to dictate how we proceed from here." Another silence, longer this time. Then his voice softer. "May I at least know where you're living, in case of emergency?" I hesitated, then relented slightly. "I've taken an in-law suite on Maple Avenue. That's all you need to know for now." "Maple Avenue? But that's only a few blocks from—" He stopped abruptly. "From what?" He cleared his throat. "Nothing. It doesn't matter." Something in his tone alerted me. "Rob? From what?" "From my apartment, that's all." The coincidence struck me as both ironic and slightly unsettling. "Well, Riverside isn't that large a town. I'm sure we'll manage to avoid awkward encounters. Of course, he agreed quickly. Too quickly. Listen, Maggie, I've been thinking. Perhaps we've been hasty. Maybe we should consider counseling before moving straight to divorce. The suggestion caught me off guard. Counseling? You walked? Out, Rob. You said it was over. I know what I said, he replied, frustration edging his voice. But I've had time to reflect. Maybe we gave up too easily. 35 years is a long time to just discard. The word choice didn't escape me. You discarded it, Rob, not me. And now you're having second thoughts because what? The reality of apartment living isn't matching your fantasy of freedom. That's not fair. No. Then why the sudden change of heart? It's been less than 2 weeks. He sighed heavily. Maybe seeing you move on so efficiently has made me realize what I'm losing. The admission hung between us, unexpected and complicated. Part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, felt vindicated. He'd expected me to crumble, to beg, to fall apart. My resilience had rattled him. I'm not interested in reconciliation, Rob. That door closed when you walked out with a pre-packed suitcase and a pre-leased apartment. People make mistakes, he said quietly, even after 4 decades together. The plea in his voice stirred something in me. Not love or longing, but a weary compassion. Yes, they do. And sometimes those mistakes have permanent consequences. I need to go now. My attorney will be in touch. After hanging up, I sat on my new bed, turning the conversation over in my mind. Rob wanted to reconcile, or said he did. 2 weeks ago, I might have leapt at the chance. Now, the very idea felt like stepping backward into a life that no longer fit. I was still pondering this when a text arrived from Emily. Dad just called me in a state. Says you've hired a shark lawyer and refused counseling. What's going on? The speed with which Rob had enlisted our daughter as an ally irritated me profoundly. I typed carefully, I've hired an experienced attorney who specializes in protecting women in late-life divorces. Your father suggested counseling after moving out without warning and telling me our marriage was over. I declined. Her response came quickly. Don't you think you should at least try? For all of us? The implication that I owed it to all of us to repair a marriage Rob had unilaterally ended sent a wave of anger through me. I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, my relationship with your father is separate from my relationship with you and James. I'm happy to discuss the former with him and the latter with you, but I won't blend them. 3 dots. Appeared and disappeared several times before her message finally arrived. This is weird, Mom. You're being weird. Dad said you've dyed your hair and bought all new clothes and you're acting like a different person. I laughed aloud at the accusation. I got highlights, not a mohawk. I bought clothes I like instead of clothes that were appropriate. And I'm not a different person. I'm just not pretending anymore. Pretending what? I considered how to answer this. Finally, I wrote that I'm satisfied with being an afterthought in everyone's life, including my own. No response came for several minutes. Then simply, I don't understand what's happening. I know, I replied, but I hope someday you will. That night, my first in my new home, I slept better than I had in years. The silence was complete in a way it never had been in the house with Rob, who snored lightly and frequently got up in the night. Here, there were no creaking floorboards, no humming appliances I had tuned out over decades. Just stillness, and myself within it. In the morning, I made coffee in my new single-cup machine, carried it to the reading chair by the bay window, and watched the sunrise paint the eastern sky in watercolor shades of pink and gold. No one was waiting for me to make breakfast, to start laundry, to remember dental appointments or anniversary gifts. The day stretched before me, entirely mine to shape. I was still savoring this sense of possibility when my phone rang. James. Mom? His voice was tight with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. Have you seen Dad? The question seemed odd. Of course not. Why would I have seen your father? He was supposed to come over last night to help me assemble the crib, but he never showed up. He's not answering his phone, and he didn't go to work today. His assistant called me, worried. A flicker of concern passed through me, quickly tamped down. He's a grown man, James. Perhaps he just needed a day to himself. That's not like Dad. He never misses work, and he wouldn't blow me off without calling. The worry in his voice was genuine, making me reconsider my dismissive response. When did you last speak to him? Yesterday afternoon. He called to tell me. James hesitated. To tell me you'd hired a divorce attorney and refused to try counseling. Of course. Rob had called both our children immediately after our conversation, casting himself as the wounded party. The familiar pattern irritated me, but I pushed the feeling aside to focus on the current concern. We did speak yesterday afternoon, I confirmed. He seemed fine, if a bit upset about the attorney. Did you try his apartment? I don't know where his apartment is, James admitted. He's been vague about it. Interesting. Rob had shared his dramatic exit with our children, but not the details of where he'd landed. All I know is that it's somewhere on or near Maple Avenue. That's what he mentioned yesterday. Maple Avenue? But that's where you... James trailed off. Yes, quite a coincidence, I agreed dryly. Listen, I'm sure he's fine. He's probably just taking a mental health day. It can't be easy realizing that blowing up your life on impulse has actual consequences. Mom! James's voice held a note of reproach. This isn't like you. The same refrain, from everyone. Not like you. But who was I exactly? The accommodating woman they'd all taken for granted. Or someone with her own thoughts, feelings, and right to righteous anger. I'm concerned, I conceded, softening slightly. But not panicked. Your father is capable and resourceful. If you haven't heard from him by this evening, then perhaps we should worry. After we hung up, I tried to return to my peaceful morning, but a seed of unease had been planted. Rob had never been one to shirk responsibilities or disappear without explanation. For all his faults, reliability had been his hallmark. By noon, when James called again to report still no word from Rob, my concern had deepened. I'm going to file a missing persons report, James said, his voice strained. The police won't do anything until he's been gone 24 hours, but at least it will be on record. That seems extreme, I protested, though my own worry was growing. Have you checked the hospitals? First thing I did, nothing. I bit my lip, considering. Do you know the name of his apartment complex? Maybe they have an office we could call. He never told me exactly where. He was staying, just that it was temporary until he found a proper place. Another peculiarity. Rob was methodical about such things. It was unlike him to leave details so vague. Let me make a few calls, I offered, surprising myself with the impulse to help. I know some real estate agents in town. If he rented through a management company, someone might know something. As soon as we hung up, I called Karen. This is an odd request, I began, explaining the situation. I can ask around, she offered immediately. There aren't that many rental companies in Riverside. If he's in a properly managed building, someone will know. By mid-afternoon, Karen had struck gold. Riverside Heights, she reported. That new complex on Lower Maple, near the river. The leasing agent wouldn't confirm his residence directly, but when I mentioned his name, she said, "Oh, the new tenant in 3B," before catching herself. Thank you, I said, relief washing through me. I'll pass this along to my son. But before I could call James, another thought struck me. Rob's apparent distress after our conversation yesterday, combined with his uncharacteristic disappearance, stirred a deeper worry. What if he wasn't simply avoiding responsibilities? What if he was truly in crisis? The thought propelled me into action. I grabbed my purse and keys, sent a quick text to James with the apartment information, and headed out to my car. 15 minutes later, I was standing in the lobby of Riverside Heights, a sleek, modern building that seemed at odds with Rob's usual traditional tastes. The young woman at the reception desk looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Robert Wilson," I said, trying to project calm authority. "He lives in 3B. I'm his wife." The words felt strange in my mouth, simultaneously true and false. Her expression flickered with uncertainty. "Mr. Wilson doesn't have a wife listed on his rental application?" "Of course he didn't. We're separated," I explained. "But his son called me concerned. Robert hasn't shown up for work today, which is extremely out of character." She hesitated, clearly weighing building policy against genuine concern. "I can't let you into his apartment, but I can. Call up to check on him." "Please," I nodded. She made the call, waited, then frowned. No answer. I could try the maintenance master key, but we're only supposed to use that for emergencies. "His family is genuinely concerned," I pressed. "He's never gone dark like this before." After another moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Wait here, I'll go check. If he's there and okay, I'll come right back down." The 5 minutes she was gone stretched interminably. When she finally returned, her face was pale. "You should come up," she said simply. My heart hammered as we rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. "Is he?" "He's alive," she assured me quickly, but not in good shape. She led me to 3B and unlocked the door. The apartment beyond was minimally furnished. A leather sofa, a TV on a basic stand, a dining table with 2 chairs. Empty liquor bottles littered the coffee table. And there was Rob, slumped in an armchair, unshaven, glassy-eyed, staring at nothing. "Rob?" I moved toward him cautiously. "Rob, it's Maggie." He looked up, his gaze unfocused. "Mags, what are you doing here?" His words slurred slightly, though the bottles suggested last night's drinking rather than today's. "James was worried. You missed work, didn't answer your phone." He laughed, a hollow sound. "Missed work? First time in 37 years. Boss'll have a fit." I turned to the building manager, who hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "Thank you. I'll handle this." After she left, I surveyed the dismal scene. A half-eaten takeout container sat on the kitchenette counter, at least a day old judging by appearance. Rob's normally pristine shirts were draped over chairs, his phone lying face down on the floor as if thrown. "What happened, Rob?" I asked, moving bottles aside to sit on the coffee table facing him. He gestured vaguely. "Freedom happened. Isn't it everything I dreamed?" The bitter sarcasm was so unlike him that it took me aback. "Have you been drinking since yesterday?" "Since you refused counseling," he corrected, his eyes finally focusing on me. "Since you made it clear it was really over." A complex wave of emotions washed through me. Concern, yes, but also anger. This display felt manipulative, though the devastation in his eyes seemed genuine enough. "So, this is my fault?" I asked, keeping my voice measured. "You walk out on our marriage, and when I don't come running back at the first sign, you might be having regrets. You fall apart." He had the grace to look ashamed. "No, not your fault." He passed a hand over his face. "My fault. All of it. I thought I wanted something else, something more. But there's nothing out there, Mags. Just empty apartments and takeout dinners and realizing too late what you had." The raw pain in his voice touched something in me, but it didn't erase the hurt he'd caused. I'm going to call James, I said, rising. He's worried sick about you. And then we're going to get you cleaned up, and you're going to go to work tomorrow. And apologize to your boss for the unexpected absence. Why do you care? He asked, genuine confusion in his bloodshot eyes. You should be glad to see me suffering. I considered the question carefully. Because despite everything, I spent 35 years loving you. That doesn't disappear overnight, even when the marriage does. While Rob showered, I called James, assuring him his father was fine, just working through some things. I tidied the worst of the mess, throwing out bottles and old food, gathering laundry into a pile by the door. When Rob emerged, looking marginally more human though still disheveled, I handed him a glass of water and 2 aspirin. Drink this. All of it. He complied meekly, watching me with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. You didn't have to do this. I know. I'm sorry, Maggie, for all of it. For leaving, for not appreciating what we had, for this. He gestured around the apartment. Pathetic display. I sat across from him at the small dining table. Why did you leave, Rob? Really? After all these years, I deserve the truth. He sighed deeply, staring into his empty water glass. I thought I was suffocating. Not because of you, but because of me. Because I'd built this life that looked perfect from the outside. But inside, I felt numb. Like I was playing a role. Dependable. Rob, successful Rob, family man Rob. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. The words echoed my own recent revelations so closely that I almost laughed. And you never thought to talk to me about it? To see if maybe I felt the same way? He looked up, surprised. Did you? In some ways, yes. But my response wasn't to blow up our life without warning. It was to keep going, to find meaning in caring for the people I loved. And now? I considered the question carefully. Now I'm finding meaning in caring for myself too. In rediscovering the woman I was, before I was only someone's wife, someone's mother. The woman with the wild hair and wilder dreams, he murmured. I raised an eyebrow, surprised at the reference. You remember her? Of course I remember. She's who I fell in love with. His eyes, clearer now, held genuine regret. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that she was still in there. So did I admitted. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades between us. Finally, I stood. James wants to come check on you. I told him to give you a few hours to pull yourself together. Maggie. Rob reached for my hand as I moved toward the door. Is there any chance? For us? The question hung in the air, freighted with hope and history. I looked down at his hand covering mine. Familiar, once beloved. I don't know, Rob. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that I can't go backward. The woman I'm becoming needs more than the life we had. What if I could change too? He asked. What if we could build something new together? I gently withdrew my hand. That's a conversation for another day, when you're sober and I'm more certain of the life I want. As I drove back to my new home, emotions churned within me. Seeing Rob so broken had stirred complicated feelings. Compassion? Yes, but also resentment that his crisis now demanded my attention, pulling me back into the caretaker role I was trying to shed. And beneath it all, a whisper of doubt. Was I being too harsh, too quick to close the door on redemption? I was still grappling with these questions when I arrived home to find James waiting on my doorstep, his expression a storm of worry and anger. You should have called me right away, he said as I approached. I would have gone to Dad's. He needed time to pull himself together, I replied, unlocking the door. And frankly, so did I. James followed me inside, his irritation momentarily forgotten as he took in my new space. This is not what I expected. It's nice, Mom. Thank you. I set down my purse and keys. Would you like some tea? What I'd like is to understand what's happening with our family, he said, the frustration returning to his voice. Dad falls apart. You're suddenly this completely different person, and I'm caught in the middle trying to make sense of it all. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, taking my time before turning to face him. I'm not a different person. James, I'm just finally allowing all of myself to exist, not just the parts that were convenient for everyone else. What does that even mean? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it made my heart ache. You were happy. We were a good family. Were we? I asked softly. Or did we just look good from the outside? Did you ever ask yourself if your father and I were truly happy? Or if we were just going through the motions for so long that we'd forgotten there could be more? Of course you were happy, he insisted, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I loved you and your sister fiercely, I said. I loved creating a home, marking the seasons with traditions, watching you grow into the people you've become. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being Maggie and became only mom, only wife. And your father stopped seeing me altogether. So this is Dad's fault? He didn't appreciate you enough, so you're punishing all of us? The accusation stung, but I refused to rise to it. This isn't about punishment, James. It's about growth. Painful, necessary growth. The kettle whistled, and I busied myself preparing tea, giving us both a moment to collect our thoughts. When I handed him a mug, our fingers brushed, and I was suddenly struck by the memory of his small hand in mine as we crossed streets, as I guided him through the world. I saw your father today as a person, not just as my husband or your dad, I said, sitting beside him at the small table. A flawed, struggling human being who made a decision he regrets. I felt compassion for him. But compassion doesn't mean I have to go backward. He wants to reconcile, James said. He told me when I called him after you left. I know. And you're just going to ignore that? 35 years of marriage and you won't even try? I sipped my tea, considering my words carefully. What would trying look like to you, James? Going back to the house? Pretending the past 2 weeks never happened? Burying the woman I'm becoming so that your father can feel better about his mistakes? He had no immediate answer. Your father walked out, I continued gently. He packed a bag, rented an apartment, and told me our marriage was over. He made a unilateral decision about our life together without giving me any voice in it. Now he's having regrets, and suddenly I'm expected to set aside my pain, my growth, my emerging sense of self to soothe him? You don't have to put it that way, James muttered. What way would you prefer I put it? In terms that make your father the hero of this story? The man who bravely explored independence but graciously returned when he realized his mistake? My son flinched at the edge in my voice. I just want our family back together. The raw vulnerability in his admission softened me. Oh, James. Family isn't a place or a configuration. It's a connection. Whether your father and I live together or apart, whether we reconcile or divorce, we will always be your parents. We will always love you. It's not the same. No, I agreed. It's not. Change rarely is. But different doesn't have to mean worse. We talked a while longer, James gradually shifting from defensiveness to reluctant understanding. Not acceptance, not yet, but at least an acknowledgement that my perspective had validity. When he left, promising to check on his father and call me afterward, I felt emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. The conversation had clarified something for me. I wasn't ready to close the door on reconciliation with Rob, but neither was I willing to rush back to a marriage that had failed us both in fundamental ways. What I needed, what we both needed, was time. Time for me to continue discovering who I was outside of my role as Rob's wife. Time for Rob to genuinely confront the impulses that had led him to walk away, rather than work to transform our relationship from within. Time to see if the people we were becoming could build something new together, or if we were better apart. The realization brought a measure of calm. This wasn't a crisis demanding immediate resolution. It was a process, slow and painful and potentially beautiful in its outcome, whatever that might be. That evening, I received a text from Rob. "Thank you for today. I don't deserve your kindness after what I did, but I'm grateful for it. I'm seeing a therapist tomorrow. Whatever happens between us, I need to understand why I was willing to throw away something so precious." I appreciated his honesty, the lack of pressure in his message. I responded simply, "I'm glad you're getting help. Take care of yourself, Rob." Later, as I prepared for bed in my new home, I found myself thinking about the boxes still at the house, the photo albums, the mementos, my mother's china. All the physical artifacts of a life shared with Rob. I'd been so eager to make a clean break that I'd left them behind, focusing only on immediate necessities. But those objects were part of my history, my journey to this moment. They belonged in my new life, not as anchors to the past, but as acknowledgments of it. I decided I would go back for them soon, not to reclaim the life they represented, but to integrate it into the one I was building now. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that today's crisis, Rob's breakdown, James's distress, had tested the boundaries I'd been establishing. I'd responded with compassion, but without surrendering my hard-won clarity. I'd offered help without sacrificing my needs. It wasn't perfect. The path forward remained uncertain, fraught with emotional complexity. But for tonight, in this quiet room that was entirely mine, I felt a deep certainty that I was moving in the right direction. Not away from love or connection, but toward a version of both that honored all of who I was becoming. With that thought, I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, dreamless and deep. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm to my new life, a gentle cadence of discovery and quiet joy. November arrived with crisp mornings and golden afternoons, the kind that illuminate the world with amber light. I settled into routines of my own creation. Morning pages written at my small desk as the sun rose, watercolor class on Wednesday evenings, volunteer hours at the library expanded to include leading a book club for seniors. My little in-law, Sweet, transformed from a blank canvas into a true reflection of myself. I hung art that spoke to me, not the bland landscapes Rob had preferred, but vivid abstracts and black and white photographs of distant places I hoped to visit. Eleanor taught me how to propagate houseplants, and soon my windowsills hosted tiny green tendrils stretching toward the light. I adopted a senior cat from the shelter, a dignified orange tabby named Oscar who claimed the reading chair as his own, leaving me to sit cross-legged on the floor beside him while he permitted occasional ear scratches. Through it all, I maintained my boundaries, gentle but firm. Rob called regularly, his voice steadier each time, his therapist apparently helping him untangle the midlife knots that had driven him to such drastic action. We spoke amicably about practical matters, bills, tax preparations for the coming year, the logistics of the divorce that neither of us seemed eager to finalize, but which remained a quiet presence in our conversations. James and Vanessa invited me to dinner twice. The first visit was strained, conversation halting, all of us hyper-aware of the shifting ground beneath our relationships. The second was easier, perhaps because Vanessa's pregnancy had progressed enough to give us all a neutral focus, her small baby bump prompting discussions of names and nursery colors, rather than family fractures. Emily proved the greatest surprise. Rather than pulling away, she leaned in, visiting frequently, sometimes with her children but often alone. We talked, really talked, about everything from her marriage, stronger than I'd realized, to her career ambitions, larger than she'd admitted before, to her own questions about identity beyond motherhood. "I always saw you as just Mom," she confessed one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my tiny patio. "It never occurred to me that you might have regrets or dreams beyond us." "Not regrets," I corrected gently. "Just paths not taken. We all have them." She tilted her head, studying me in the soft glow of the string lights I'd hung along the fence. "You seem happier now, even with everything that's happened." The observation gave me pause. Was I happier? The answer surprised me with its clarity. "I am," I admitted. "Not because my marriage ended or because my life was upended, but because I finally gave myself permission to matter. And I had. That was the true transformation of these past weeks, not the external changes to my appearance or living situation, but the internal shift that placed my own needs and desires on equal footing with everyone else's. But life, I was learning, doesn't allow for simple, linear progress. It circles back, tests resolve, offers new challenges just when equilibrium seems within reach. That test came on a Tuesday morning in early December, exactly 6 weeks after Rob had walked out. I was preparing to visit the house, our house, to finally collect more of my belongings. The divorce proceedings had begun, paperwork filed by respective attorneys, the process civil if somber. Though Rob and I communicated regularly, we had carefully avoided being in the same physical space, both apparently intuiting that such an encounter would be emotionally complicated. I had arranged to go while he was at work, giving myself the privacy to sort through decades of accumulated possessions without an audience. But as I pulled into the driveway, his car sat in its usual spot. My heart sank even as irritation flared. Had he forgotten our arrangement, or deliberately ignored it? For a moment I considered leaving, rescheduling for another day. But the thought of prolonging this task, already postponed multiple times, made me square my shoulders and approach the front door. I still had a key, but it felt wrong to use it. This wasn't my home anymore. I knocked. Rob answered almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He looked different. Healthier than during his apartment breakdown, certainly, but changed. In subtler ways. A new haircut, shorter and more current than his decades-old style. Casual clothes rather than the business attire or weekend golf shirts that had constituted his entire wardrobe for as long as I could remember. "Maggie," he said, and something in the way he spoke my name, not with possession or presumption, but with a kind of careful respect, caught me off guard. "You were supposed to be at work," I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. "I took the day off. I thought we should talk, really talk, in person." I hesitated, torn between annoyance at his presumption and recognition of its inevitability. Sooner or later, we would have to face each other properly. "I came to collect my things." "I know, and you can. But maybe we could have coffee first? I've made a fresh pot." The invitation was offered without pressure, an option I could freely decline. That more than anything made me nod and step inside. The house felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like returning to a childhood home long after moving away. Everything was as I remembered it, yet my perspective had shifted so profoundly that nothing looked quite the same. Rob led me to the kitchen, always the heart of our home, and poured coffee into my favorite mug without asking. The small gesture of remembrance touched me unexpectedly. "You look well," he said as we sat at the breakfast nook where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. "More than well. You look vibrant." "Thank you," I replied, cradling the warm mug. "You seem better, too." He nodded, running a hand through his newly cropped hair. "Therapy helps. And time, and—" He hesitated. "Perspective." Perspective? On what I threw away, on why I did it, He gazed out the window toward the backyard, where the rose bushes I'd tended for years stood dormant for winter. Do you remember our 10th anniversary trip? To that bed and breakfast in Vermont? The question seemed random, but I nodded. Of course. It was autumn. The foliage was spectacular. We took that hike up to the ridge, he continued. It was longer than we expected, and you were worried about getting back before dark. But when we reached the top, the view, I finished softly. Miles of forests in every shade of red and gold. You said something I never forgot. You said, "Sometimes you have to climb higher to see how vast the world really is." He turned back to me, his eyes holding mine. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how I've spent my entire adult life in the valley, head down, following the established path. Work, home, family obligations, round and round in circles, never climbing high enough to see what else might be out there. I sipped my coffee, allowing him the space to continue. My therapist helped me see that I wasn't really trying to escape you when I left. I was trying to escape the smallness of the life I'd created for myself, the narrowness, the predictability. He sighed. But I went about it all wrong. Instead of destroying what we had, I should have talked to you, should have asked if you felt it too, that sense of confinement. I did, I admitted, but I channeled it differently. I found meaning in the smallness, in the daily acts of care. Until you couldn't anymore, he observed. Until I forced your hand by leaving. I considered this. Maybe I needed the push. Maybe we both did. Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken questions. "Why did you want to talk today, Rob?" I finally asked. "What's changed?" He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what went wrong, about what I want moving forward, and I've realized something important." "What's that?" "That I don't want to be married to the woman you were pretending to be for my comfort. I want to know the woman you actually are." He gestured to me, encompassing the changes both visible and invisible. This Maggie, the one with opinions and boundaries and a life of her own making. The declaration caught me completely off guard. I had expected pleas for reconciliation based on nostalgia, on the comfort of the familiar. Not this recognition of transformation, this embrace of the very changes that had initially threatened him. "You don't even know who I'm becoming," I said carefully. "I barely know myself." "That's just it," he replied, a new energy animating his features. "I want to find out. Not as your husband, necessarily. Maybe just as someone who cares about you. Someone who wants to see you flourish rather than diminish." I set down my mug, studying him with new eyes. Was this performance? A strategy to win me back? But no. There was an authenticity to his words, a humility that the old Rob could never have mustered. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "Friendship," he said simply. "For now, a chance to get to know each other again, without expectations or obligations, to see if the people we're becoming might have a place in each other's lives, in whatever form that takes. And if that friendship never leads back to marriage, then I'll have the privilege of knowing the real Maggie Wilson, which is more than I deserved after the way I left." The answer disarmed me completely. It acknowledged my autonomy, respected my journey, asked for nothing beyond the opportunity to witness it. "I'd like that," I found myself saying. "Friendship, new territory for us." Relief softened his features. "Thank you." We finished our coffee, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. His therapy insights, my watercolor progress, news of James and Vanessa's impending parenthood. When we'd drained our mugs, I stood. "I should start sorting through my things. I didn't bring many boxes, so I'll focus on the essentials today." "Let me help," he offered, then quickly added, "Or not." Whatever makes you comfortable. I considered the offer. Working together would be more efficient, and perhaps a practical test of this tentative new friendship. You can help, I decided. But Rob, this doesn't change the divorce proceedings. Not yet, anyway. I need that legal clarity while we figure out whatever this is. He nodded, accepting the boundary without protest. Understood. We spent the afternoon moving methodically through the house, boxing my books, my mother's china, photograph, albums, and the various treasures that held meaning for me alone. Rob worked alongside me with surprising sensitivity, never questioning my choices, offering help when needed, but otherwise giving me space to process the emotional weight of dismantling a shared life. By late afternoon, my car was filled with carefully packed boxes, and I was physically and emotionally exhausted. We stood in the driveway in the fading winter light, an awkward moment of uncertainty between us. "Thank you," I said simply, "for your help, and for—" I gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the complex appreciation I felt for his unexpected evolution. "Thank you for giving me a chance to show you who I might become," he replied, "even if it's just as your friend." I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's emotional currents. "I should go. Of course." He stepped back, hands in his pockets. "Maggie, would you consider having dinner sometime next week? At that new place downtown everyone's talking about? Just two friends catching up." The invitation hung in the air between us, a bridge to possibility without demand. A month ago, I might have seen it as a trap, an attempt to pull me back into old patterns. Now, secure in my new sense of self, it felt like an opportunity to continue this careful exploration of what might be. "I'd like that," I said. "Text me the details." As I drove away, boxes of my past carefully packed around me, I felt a curious lightness. Not the giddy relief of a problem solved or a decision made, but the open-ended possibility of a path not yet defined. Rob and I might find our way back to each other in some new configuration, or we might not. The beauty was in the uncertainty, in the freedom to discover rather than presume. That evening, back in my little sanctuary, I unpacked my mother's china, arranging it in the small cabinet Eleanor and Henry had helped me refinish. The delicate floral pattern, once formal, used only for holidays and special occasions, seemed different in this context. Not precious heirlooms to be protected, but beautiful objects meant to be enjoyed daily. Oscar watched from his perch, on the reading chair, tail twitching with feline judgment as I rearranged my space to accommodate these treasures from my past. When I finally settled beside him, scratching under his chin in the exact spot he preferred, my phone chimed with a text from Emily. "The kids made something for your new place. Can we stop by this weekend to deliver it?" I smiled, typing back, "Of course, I'd love that." Another chime, this time from James. "Vanessa's ultrasound tomorrow at 2. Would mean a lot if you could come." The invitation touched me deeply. Not an obligation or expectation, but a genuine desire to include me in a significant moment. "I'll be there," I replied. Setting down my phone, I gazed around my small but perfect space, the watercolors I'd painted hanging on the walls, Oscar purring beside me, treasured objects from my past now integrated into my present, invitations to be part of my children's futures waiting to be fulfilled. 6 weeks ago, I had sat in my car outside James and Vanessa's house, feeling utterly alone and adrift. I had lost my husband, my home, my sense of place in the world. What I couldn't see then, what I was only beginning to understand now, was that those losses had cleared the ground for something new to grow. Not a smaller life, as I had feared, but a larger one. Not an existence defined by absence, but one expanded by presence. My own, fully realized presence in every moment, every choice, every relationship. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, delicate flakes illuminated by the streetlights. I watched them dance in the darkness, each one unique, each one adding to the transforming landscape. By morning, the world would look different, familiar contours softened and reshaped by the accumulation of these tiny changes, just as I had been. The thought brought a smile to my lips and peace to my heart. Whatever came next, reconciliation, or permanent separation from Rob, deepened connections with my children, or continued navigation of our evolving relationships, new friendships, or rekindled old ones, I would face it as myself. Not the self I had been before that fateful evening when my life imploded, but the self I was discovering day by day, choice by choice, complete, sufficient, whole. The snow continued to fall, and I watched it with quiet joy, no longer mourning what was lost, but celebrating what had been found, myself at last. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.